Hello, dear colleagues. My name is Pavel Merinov. I'm a strategy and leadership consultant. What I do is I help leaders all across the globe figure out their strengths, their development areas, and actually foster entrepreneurial culture in their teams and organizations. Whether it is about tapping into most fundamental skills and proclivities that they might be having, but they are hidden and implicit, or nurturing those skills and abilities and proclivities and aptitudes that they do not yet obtain, that they do not yet have, but they need to be equipped with those things in order to succeed in this ever-changing environment. So today we'll be talking about strategic agility as the core competency of entrepreneurial thinking as a meta competency, as a huge overarching construct that actually leads us to a very simple idea. In today's world, where we need to show adaptability, where we need to solve complex problems, where we need to make decisions very fast under uncertainty and actually get results through other people and with other people, we need to always juggle with those contradicting and almost mutually exclusive things. We need to be both systematic and flexible, both structured and spontaneous, both fundamental and disciplined, and lively and energetic. So, how can we show that versatility without losing the business savviness while solving those problems? This is where strategic agility kicks in. We'll be talking about what it is, how does it work, and how to practice it. And to put things into perspective, this is not an easy task. And that is why when we're talking about fostering entrepreneurial culture in general, we need to dig into 5 specific domains. So these domains cover different territories that a modern leader that wants and strives to be successful, whether on their own entrepreneurial journey or as an entrepreneur in a company, they have to be proficient in those 5 areas. So area number 1 is domain of ideas. Of course, we need to tell other people about our innovative product, about our disruptive technology, about the new perspective, about the change that we're introducing. At the same time, the very idea has to be feasible, viable, and desirable. So we need to be not just creative, otherwise we will be potentially simply eccentric or imaginative. We need to be as practical as we can be, but also not becoming too pragmatic for us to become narrow minded. The second domain is simply called leadership, but this is an eternal topic. This is as huge as it can get because leadership is so multifaceted that no one in their sane mind can say that they understand how leadership works fully. Of course, we know that leadership styles are different, leadership contexts are different, leadership approaches could and should be different. But what is the ideal style? None of them is ideal. So, in order to be effective as a leader, we have to foster and master the ability to be versatile, to be multi equipped with different tools, skill sets, and mindset to be able to switch and smoothly transition between those ways of thinking and ways of approaching problems and ways of dealing with different people. The third domain is communication. If we have a great idea, if we're masterful about choosing the approach and switching from one to another, fantastic. But we need to get our message across. And some situations imply that the conversations can be not easy, they can be difficult, they can be challenging. And it can get us into some basic stuff like providing person feedback, or it can be something more serious, helping the other person identify their potential and probably get some new ideas together. Or it can be about helping the colleague or helping the teammate or helping a subordinate understand the company's vision better and find themselves in that big picture. So whatever we're talking about, whether it is big or small, it is all about interactions. So we will not exaggerate if we say that the main leadership tool is sometimes a discussion. So communication taps into that. The fourth domain is change. If our idea, if our intention, if our ambition is not oriented towards making some positive impact in whatever we are thinking about, a product, a process, a relationship, whatever, probably it's not a good idea. Probably it's not a valuable idea, because the main measure of value of any improvement that we're thinking that we're introducing is what is the actual change? What is the before and after? And what is the crack that we're making by implementing that change? So, figuring out how to be as adaptive as possible, figuring out how to help others embrace change, and figuring out how to unite ourselves, our people, and ideas with potential so that we can be ambassadors of change while also being realistic and pragmatic. This is something absolutely non trivial. And finally, the last but not the least, the fifth domain, strategy, means that we need to be forward thinking. We need to be thinking not just outside the box, but we need to figure out what the horizons of our planning are and what could be reverse engineered into now, but what can be forward engineered into further future, and where our assumptions end and the real uncertainty begins. How can we cascade it throughout the organization? How can we combine the measurements of effectiveness between that large scale and big picture thinking and everyday routine tasks? So, all of these things are really important when we're thinking about strategy, not just as being somewhere there in the clouds, but being somewhere in between and traveling between the high level thinking and very down to earth thinking. So, strategy, ideas, leadership, communication, change, and strategy. These are five domains to tap into when we want to foster entrepreneurial culture. Now, thinking of strategy itself as one of the two key components of strategic agility, as the key competency that we're tapping into, is a difficult one, because there are hundreds of definitions of strategy, whether it is a market position, whether it is a key perception of our brand or product or service by the target audience, or if it's an overarching logic of a solution that we introduce in order to achieve our goals and solve the key problems that we've preliminarily identified. So, strategy is something that requires focus, it requires choice, and it requires direction. Focus not to do everything at once, choice to be able to say no to things that do not support our vision, and finally, we need to be as consistent as possible to make it clear, succinct, and manageable. Now, when we're talking about strategic agility, we're talking not only about strategy, of course, we're talking about agility as well. And this component is breaking the scheme, because strategy is by definition something very systematic. It is something very fundamental, something very, very solid. It has to be that way. But when we need to make decisions under uncertainty, we need to put into this equation something that we can call a parameter of ambiguity. And in today's new strategy world, when the competition, the marketing demands, the customer requirements, the product features, whatever is changing with so rapid a rhythm, we need to figure out how to combine those things. And what does it mean to be strategically agile? Actually, it is about combining thinking in a big picture mode and thinking fast, knowing what is the grand scheme of things and knowing when to change it. seeing that grand vision of where we want to go from here and why, to be able to adjust our approach as long as we're being attentive to the new inputs that we are receiving. So it's not just about being able to circle back to your initial decision or cancel your initial approach or think, okay, we'll change direction. It's about that intentional pivot that we can make. So strategic agility means an ability, a set of skills and attitudes to proactively, not reactively, proactively adjust our approaches depending on what is happening, what could be happening, and what should be happening in the context that we're in, or in the context that we're striving to get in, so that we can focus on our key priorities and not make our attention, our energy, and resources diffuse all over. So, how can we be strategic and still agile? How can we be systematic and still adaptive to change? This is the questions that we're going to answer and practice in today's session. But that will be a long journey. So, I invite you to join me in this journey.